Labai ačiū, kad jūs atėjot šitą keistą vakarą, kai nei tai pavasaris, nei vis dar žiema, į naują muziejų. Sakiau, ką tik už durų, kad truputėlį gaila, kad tas laikas toks suspaustas ir nežinau, ar esat visi čia, turbūt praėję, bet buvę gal turbūt mažai kas dar, ar ne, nes muziejus yra tokio šviežumo, kad net dažų kvapas dar justi jį įėjus. Tai labai gera, kad šitas susitikimas su Deborah Feldman vyksta naujame muziejuje. Aš jame buvau, kai dar ekspozicija nebuvo sudėta į savo vietas. Labai džiaugiuosi, kad mes pradedam taikytis arba bent jau šiek tiek permastyti ir pabūti su savo istorinė atmintim. Ir labai gerai, kad mes turim šitą kultūros ir tapatybės žydų galimybę jas pažinti. Tai visai simboliška, kad Deborah Feldman yra čia. Kalbant apie tai, ką mes čia tuoj pat darysim, tai aš jau atėjus prašiau pakelti rankas, kas skaitėt, bent jau Neortodoksiška. Visai nemažai tų rankų pakilo, pakartojam. Tai viskas gerai, reiškia, konteksto jums pasakoti nereikia. Bet ar Egzodą daugiau kas nors skaitė, ne tik tai prieš 5:30, štai pirmūnai. Atsiprašau, pirmūnai. Tai mes su Deborah turbūt užkabinsim ir to konteksto, bet jinai Lietuvoje vieši dėl to, kad Egzodas, Papildytas leidimas yra pristatytas lietuvių kalba pagaliau. Ir rytoj dar beje jinai lankysis knygų mugėje, tai jeigu kam nors norėsis dar truputėlį pabūti jos šviesoje, tai 11 val. Labai kviečiu nuvažiuoti į tą pragarą, nes tai yra tiesiog ne ta žodžio prasme pragaras. Ten reikia dar susikaupti, kad ten nuvažiuoti, nes kamštis prie Vingio prasideda. Bet nieko tokio, praeis metai, pamiršim ir vėl iš naujo nersim į knygų pasaulį. Dar žinau, kad ne visi angliškai šneka. Ir žinokit, tiesą pasakius, būsiu atvira, nežinau, kaip čia dabar išspręsti šitą problemą. Nes jeigu aš pradėsiu vertėjauti, tai matyt, kad bus taip šleivai kreivai, kad iš viso viskas blogai gausis, o iš jaudulio gali ir taip blogai būti. Tai aš dabar galvoju, gal aš kažkokiom bent trumpom frazėm, ar ne, tiems, kurie tiesiog nekomfortiškai jaučiasi dėl tos užsienio kalbos. Bet vis tiek gal reikia pradėti nuo to, kad Deborah, you visited our new museum. What's your impression?
Well, actually, I was interrupted in the middle because they said, oh, it's time for the talk, and we had to come back down, and I was a bit surprised because I was so deep in the project of discovering everything. It's one of the reasons I came here. I was so happy when I got the invitation. I thought, wow, I will get to experience Vilnius. I've never been. I've only heard many, many stories since I'm a child. And it's been a really wonderful day, very busy, very full. From the morning, we walk around. I have a guide, Erica, I think she's here, and she explained everything to me, and it's been really wonderful. And I'm very grateful, by the way, that Lithuania is, believe it or not, one of my strongest markets. Now, this sounds like a very commercial thing to say, but as an author, at an American publisher, you get a statement twice a year, and it shows you where you sell the most books, where you sell the least books. And Lithuania is a rather small country in comparison to other countries where my books sell, but proportionately it has sold a high number. And I was always very curious, what is it about the Lithuanians that they like me so much? So I wanted to come and ask you, in a sense.
Yes, you are very popular here. And even series from Netflix as well. I mean, it was exploded when it launched. So yeah. Kodėl Deborah tokia populiari Lietuvoje?
Todėl, kad knyga tiesiog pritrenkė, neužmiršiu tokios knygas.
You have to translate.
Unforgettable, extraordinary.
Okay.
The book of the year, maybe, or even the life.
Congratulations to BALTO.
Yeah, so when you get the invitation and you knew that you will come to Vilnius, what is the main the main argument why you need to go there? Because I know that you have some roots here as well.
Yes, it's true that I have one great-grandmother who went from Lithuania to the UK in 1905. But actually she died before I was born, and the only reason I know about this is because, as I say in Exodus, when I was a child, the teachers in my school told us that we have the obligation to make a family tree. And I was very afraid of this assignment because I had family secrets. I did not want my peers in the school to find out. But I told my grandmother, and she says, don't worry, we will dig into history and we will find a bunch of rabbis and you can show them. And we started to dig, and on the mother's side of my family, because I didn't have contact with my mother at the time, it was very hard to get information, and my grandmother wrote to an uncle living far away, and a great uncle. And he was quite kind, and he sent me a lot of papers and photos, and in this collection I found out that on my mother's side, that her father was the son of a Lithuanian immigrant. But I couldn't find out anything more about her, because she had died so young. But I knew just that it was a tragic story, a little bit, that immigration was always very hard. Even my grandfather, when he emigrated to the UK from Germany, he was too old to start again, and he never quite adapted. And I think the story of my grandmother was of a woman who never quite was able to start over. And I think, in a sense, to come to Vilnius is not just about understanding that, in a way, yes, I have roots everywhere, but it's also about this idea that you can have collective roots, and that even if I don't have any grandparents or great-grandparents who are from Vilnius, for example, just from what I saw in this museum, just from the language that I can read and understand, you get a sense of collective European culture that also I am a part of, and that's something that is a big theme in my second book, is this idea that, oh, actually I'm not American, I'm European.
I will translate short. Aš paklausiau Deboros apie motivaciją pagrindinę atvažiuoti į Vilnių, kai ją pakvietė. Ir aš buvau skaičius, kad jos seneliai, kurių jinai nespėjo pažinti, 1908, man atrodo, išvažiavo, paliko Lietuvą ir išvažiavo į Angliją. Ir jinai šitą faktą sužinojo, knygoje apie tai rašoma, tai tikrai man buvo truputėlį net kažkokio savotiško humoro tame, apie tai, kad jinai mokykloje turėjo padaryti šeimos medį ir jinai labai gėdijosi, kad nepritaps ir vienintelė neturės ko pasigirti, bet mama jai sakė, mes to rasim krūvą rabinų ir kitokių kilmingų proprosenelių ir viskas bus gerai. Tai nesakysiu, ko jos ten rado ir kaip tas medis galų gale atrodė, bet taip ta žinia apie močiutę ir senelį Vilniuje atsirado. Ir kas yra dar turbūt labai emocionalu, sakyčiau, kad jos močiutė neturėjo galimybės pradėti iš naujo gyvenimo, pakeisti jo ir kažkokio kito kelio ieškoti. Tai šito aš dar Deboros nepaklausiau, bet man atrodo, kad vis tiek kažkoks likimas ir kažkokia simbolika yra tame, nes jinai sugebėjo pačiupti galimybę už uodegos ir savo gyvenimą taip pakeisti, kad net nelabai tikisi, kad tai realaus žmogaus, realus gyvenimas, ar ne? Ir dar apie šaknis jinai truputėlį kalbėjo ta prasme, kad šioje knygoje beje irgi labai daug jinai keliauja po Ameriką, jinai bando toje Amerikoje pritapti, bet galų gale jinai jaučiasi, kad jos šaknis yra ne Amerikoje, jinai ne amerikietė, jinai yra europietė, jinai iš čia. Tai tuos dalykus jūs irgi Egzode jį skaitydami rasit. Did you have any time to dig a bit about our dark side of our history? I mean, Holocaust times and survivors, and I mean, as I understand, Sumatra Hasids are survivors from Holocaust, yes? I'm sorry for my knowledge, of course, but did you heard something about, I mean, Holocaust in Europe when you was a child? Or?
I learned a lot about the Holocaust as a child, but never from an individual perspective, always as a collective experience, never specific. I became very curious about the specific experiences of my grandmother when I left the community, because I think I missed her a lot and I wanted to know her story, and she never talked about her story. So much of this book is about finding out about her, and then through finding out about her, finding out other secrets in my family. And I had a phase where I was obsessed with learning about the history of the Holocaust all over Europe. And of course, I also spent some time reading about the Holocaust in the Baltic countries, and especially because there is a connection to Berlin, because many of the Jewish people from Berlin, where I live now, were deported to Baltic countries to be murdered there. So yes, I'm aware. On the other hand, I want to be honest and say that I am now at a point in my life where I feel I fulfilled my responsibility to learn what I needed to learn and to understand the lessons of this knowledge and to apply it to today. And I think that it might sound a bit odd, but sometimes we get stuck in history and we don't ever manage to move past it. We freeze it. We freeze ourselves in it. And this can often prevent us from understanding its lessons and from using its lessons in our present. And for me, this would be such a waste of this knowledge.
On the other hand, we have a huge problem here, We need to find a way how we will rethink our history. And just to stop being silent, So very uncommon and very painful, so.
I understand what you're referring to. I mean, I'm living for 10 years in Berlin, and as I was discussing all day today, it's very frightening to me that in Germany there is currently more than 30% support for the far-right party. That is the first time since the Nazis. So it's incredibly chilling, and I think a lot about if I have to leave, when I have to leave. All of my Jewish friends in Berlin are now talking about when they have to leave and where they should go. So I'm very aware that right now history is very vital, but I also know that the reason that we are in this situation is because we never really learn from history. And so sometimes I ask myself, what is this obsession with history really about? Because I feel that the obsession with history allows us to ignore it in a way. We become so obsessed that we stop seeing it for what it really is. We stop being able to recognize it. Many of the people in the far-right party in Germany, they say, we love Jews, we love Israel. The other people are the Nazis now. You understand? It's very scary.
Tai tik tai labai trumpai, kiek aš sugebu. Aš paklausiau Deboros, ar nespėjo bent šiek tiek į mūsų kontekstą įšokti apie mūsų istorinės žaizdas ir istorinę atmintį. Ir apskritai, jinai užaugo Hasidų bendruomeniai, kuri vadinasi Samatros Hasidų bendruomenė, ir ta bendruomenė yra gimusi, jeigu šitas žodis čia tinka, iš holokaustą išgyvenusių žmonių. Tai jinai pasakoja, kad jinai gilinosi į holokaustą visoje Europoje, aišku, skaitant Baltijos šalis, net buvo tam tikrą prasme užstrigus tame buvime su šitą temą. Ir ką jinai dar labai nejaukaus pasakoja, tai kad istorija turi, kaip mes visi žinom, bruožą kartotis. Ir kad dabar Vokietijoje, kur jinai gyvena, jos draugai kalbasi tarpusavį, kada reikės vėl bėgti kažkur, nors jau greit turbūt 100 metų skaičiuosim, kai žmonės bėgo, stengiasi išgyventi ir neišgyveno milijonais. Ir tai iš tikrųjų gąsdina, bet tuo pačiu mes negalim turbūt užstrigti nuolatiniai baimei ir nuolatiniam mąstymui apie istoriją, nes tai irgi mūsų turbūt niekur neveda. Ir kas baisiausia, tai niekaip nepadeda mums susitaikyti su tais dalykais, su kuriais mes privalom susitaikyti ir juos paleisti. Turbūt taip. Okay. Wow, so sensitive, emotional.
Well done with the translation. That was really fast.
Yes, it's my hobby to speak fast, My second name is Dovilė Fast Speaker Filmanavičiūtė. Yeah, let's talk maybe a bit about your books, okay? I mean, it's unbelievable that is real story of real person.
I agree.
Yes. Do you have some time to reflect yourself? I mean, that it's your life and you did it, you escaped from there, and it's insane. I mean, literally.
I'm 37, so it's 15 years now that I'm out. It's a long time, and a lot has changed since then. The most significant change being that when I left, I was one of maybe 20, 30, maximum 40 people in the world who had left. And now there are so many thousands that we cannot count them. And of course, it's not to do with my book per se, but with the advent of the technological age. It was the internet that allowed that small group of people back then, these 30 people, to leave because they found each other on the internet. They found information and answers to questions on the internet. The first thing I did on the internet was look for a school, start a blog. These are things that were not possible before. So what happens is the technological age starts, people who are full of doubts and questions start to find each other on the internet. Then you have a book like this that is published, then more books about this topic are published. I'm not the only one. And then all of a sudden people from this world, they start to hear, oh, there are people who left and they are okay. Because the narrative until that point was nobody who leaves can be successful. Nobody who leaves can be happy. That was the story. The story was, yes, we always had one or two crazy people, but their lives were miserable. And it was a failure. But suddenly there was proof that it's not true, that it's possible to go and to take also your child. I'm the first person to take my child and to build a new life. And when the Netflix series came out in 2020, and it achieved, of course, a kind of pop cultural recognition that books don't generally achieve, this caused like a kind of explosion. Because suddenly people who saw themselves in the central figure of Esti realized, oh, it's totally normal that I feel this way. It's legitimate. I can do what she did, and I can expect that when I say to people, oh, I am from this community, they will recognize what this means because they saw the series. And this is what is most significant, the recognition, because one of the things that I suffered under when I left was that nobody knew where I was from. If I say I'm from the Hasidic community, they said, what is that? I have to always explain. And it's not enough to explain because they don't have any images in their head. But today when a young woman comes to university and says, I grew up in the Hasidic community, they think of Esti. And there is a certain warmth, there is a certain kindness, and there is an understanding there. And when you have that understanding, it makes leaving much easier. And in that way, I think, altogether, my work and my life story became part of something bigger. And this bigger thing, it's not about Jewish people or religious people, it's about this idea that when someone is amongst us that is different, that we don't engage this person as a stranger, but as our potential neighbor or a potential friend. And so in a sense, the story of Esti, it's actually a story of a refugee, if you think about it. And I think in Lithuania, you really understand what it's like to suddenly have refugees in your midst. And that's why I think I always thought of my own journey as universal. And it surprised me when, in the beginning, when I tried to sell the book to the publisher, they said, oh no, but it's a Jewish story. Why would not Jewish people want to read it? It's a New York story. Why would people not in New York want to read it? Write a little article in the newspaper. You don't need a book, they said to me. Yeah. But I proved them wrong, so.
Aš paklausiau Deboros, ar įmanoma po kurio laiko reflektuoti pačiai save, nes jos gyvenimo istorija yra tiesiog sunku epitetą rasti. Ir jinai sako, kad kai jau praėjo 15 metų, jinai supranta, kad tai, ką jinai padarė, tapo kai kuo didesniu dėl to, kad tais laikais, prieš tos 15 metų, gal šiek tiek mažiau skaitmeninių galimybių buvo ir taip toliau, bet iš Hasidų bendruomenės buvo pabėgę 30-40 žmonių, dabar jų yra tūkstančiai ir istorija, kuri buvo brukama tiems žmonėms, kurie taip jautėsi ir bandė bėgti, buvo apie tai, kad jeigu jūs išeisit iš bendruomenės, jūs niekaip neišgyvensit ir neįmanoma išėjus iš Hasidų bendruomenės būti sėkmingų ir laimingų. Ir jiems visiems pavyko ir ypatingai turbūt didžiulis sprogimas kultūrinė prasme įvyko, kai pasirodė Neortodoksiškos serialas Netflix platformoje. Tada milijonai žmonių suprato, kas tai, apie ką tai ir net sutikę žmogų, kuris būdavo pabėgęs nuo Hasidų bendruomenės, jie priimdavo jį labai šiltai, labai draugiškai, labai atjaučiančiai, nes žinodavo, kas tai yra. Matė šitą serialą ir dar vienas svarbus momentas, apie ką Deborah kalba, tai yra Esti, tai yra pagrindinė herojė tam seriale. Tai yra turbūt dar šalia Hasidų istorijos bendruomenės ir moters pabėgimo iš ten, tai yra pabėgėlės istorija ir mes turbūt šiandien labai neblogai suprantam, kas tai yra ir kaip svarbu tuos žmonės priimti tiesiog kaip žmonės, o ne kaip mes dažnai, tikiuosi ne šitoje auditorijoje, netikiuosi žinau ne šitoje auditorijoje, bet kaip mes su jais elgiamės ir kaip selektyviai empatiją dalinam, ar ne? Nes vieni pabėgėliai yra geresni už kitus pabėgėlius ir taip toliau ir taip toliau. Yes, I think I translated everything. So my question is that, yes, as I understood, so all the darkness left behind you, how do you live today? You told me before that you are presented as cultural activist,
They told me that you are that's what they told me when I asked who will do the talk, and they said, she's a cultural activist. And I thought, yes, and I thought, what a great term. I never heard this term before. I also want to be one.
Oh my God,
it's great.
It was about me.
I totally understand why they said it now.
So, what do you do for, become cultural activist?
Yeah, that's something you have to explain. I'm actually learning now. Sometimes, my publisher called me last week and said, Deborah, what is wrong with you? Are you becoming an activist? Are you still going to write books? And I said, I'm a literary activist. Because with books you can do a lot of activism. But my life actually today, it's quite normal. My son is now going to be 18 and he's going off to university, and I'm remarried, and my life is in many ways boring and nice, and I like to spend time in the country and plant a garden and go for walks with my dog, and very simple.
Are you still hiding books in your...
No, the books are everywhere. They're on piles and on shelves and on the tables, and there's too many books everywhere. It's always a problem, but luckily I married a man who loves books as much as I do. And I think that in many ways the success of my life is in the banality of it. It's just really normal and simple, and I feel very calm and happy. And I said today at lunch, after I had the I said, if I had to die tomorrow, it would be okay, because I feel I have lived enough and everything else is a bonus. And I think it's something nice to say with 37. I feel very full and satisfied. Not just from the Ceppeline.
Ceppelinai and bread ice cream.
Yeah, I had bread ice cream.
Ir dabar aš šiandien valgė juodos duonos ledų Vilniuje, sakė, jau nufotografavo, išsiuntė visiems draugams visam pasaulyje, eina iš proto, nes gyvenime nevalgė. Nesakė, kad nesąmonės tokios, čia aš taip sugalvojau. Bet kai aš jos paklausiau, kaip jinai gyvena šiandien, ir ar ta tamsa yra likus už nugaros, tai jinai absoliučiai paprastai kalba apie tai, kad jinai gyvena padaliausiai įmanomą gyvenimą, kuris yra pilnas laimės detalių, nuo to, kad jinai ištekėjo žmogaus, kuris irgi myli taip pat knygas kaip jinai, iki to, kad jos sūnui jau 18 ir jis įstos į universitetą. Ir dar aš prisiskaičiau jos interviu, ką jisai dar ten veikia gyvenime, tu aš jos paklausiu, bet taip. As I understand, you didn't have any dream to become a writer in your life entire, I mean.
I didn't have any dreams, period, I guess. I was actually explaining this in an interview earlier today. Where I come from, women are taught not to have a strong sense of self-worth. And to have real, concrete dreams, you have to believe you are worth the dream. You have to believe you deserve the dream. So I had fantasies, yes, but I differentiate fantasies from dreams because dreams are things you want to achieve and fantasies are things you believe are impossible to achieve. This changed when my son was born because then it was not about me being worth it, but he was worth it. And I changed my whole attitude to having ambitions and dreams. But I became very practical and in a way very grown up, right? Because when we are young, our dreams are very fabulous and sparkly. And when we are parents, I think our dreams are very simple, but also very powerful. Because if you had met me 20 years ago, no one in this room would have believed that all of this would be possible. No one, not me, not anyone else. I remember when I went to see my lawyer to ask her about leaving my community with my child, she said, "It's never been done. Your chances are slim to none." And I knew when I took the risk that this is true. Is it a dream that I fulfilled? Or is it a desire that I forced? I think there is a difference. I think what we tell ourselves about the things we want impact whether we will achieve them. And the word dream, to me, it implies something delusional, something far-fetched. And so I say to people, don't have dreams, just have things you want. And just have the will to pursue them.
Wow. Just act, just do it.
Be a cultural activist.
Kadangi Deborah knygas parašė dėl to, kad jai taip buvo patarus teisininkė, kad jeigu jinai nori turėti bent menkiausią šansą pabėgti iš tos bendruomenės, tai turi būti vieša ir garsu. Tai aš jos paklausiau, kad ar iš viso tokia svajonė kur nors sklandė, kad jinai galėtų tapti rašytoja, pabėgus ar nepabėgus, čia jau maža detalė, bet rašyti. Tai Deborah sako, kad mes privalom suprasti, kad toje bendruomenėje, kurioje jinai gimė ir užaugo, moteris iš viso nelabai turi apskritai jokių galimybių, bet svajonės, tokios net leksikos ten nėra, nes jinai neverta. Jinai svajoti yra neverta. Tai jinai su tuo ir augo, kad svajoti, kad svajoti tai yra uždrausta ir neįmanoma. Ar tai buvo kažkokios fantazijos, galbūt. Ir galų gale, tas požiūris turbūt, aš suprantu, irgi iš ten pat atsineštas, į dabar galvoja, kad svajonės irgi turbūt nėra tas žodis, kurį jinai vartotų savo leksikoje. Jinai daugiau turbūt imasi veiksmų, aš taip suprantu, ir galvoja apie dalykus, kurių jinai nori. Ir tada turbūt, kai tu jau kažko nori, tai belieka tik pasiimti, ar ne? Kai kam dar reikia ir pabėgti nuo religinės bendruomenės New York'e. Oi, yes.
They help you to remember what they help you with the translation?
No, they are reflecting your minds as well. It's beautiful. Tai aš kviečiu labai jums netilėti ir toliau, pagaliau per 37 mano metus atsirado publika, kuri reaguoja. Ar turite klausimų?
What was the joke?
The joke was that always when I'm asking, do you have some questions? Please join the discussion. It's silent, you know, absolute silent. And now they are reflecting. It's a dream.
It's because
it's a dream.
Of the activism.
Yes.
This is what it is.
Yes. So another thing about writing I would like to ask you is it's about Exodus. You write it. You added something new because it was a book, and then you reflected everything, and then you write it.
Yeah.
Why? What is the idea behind?
Because it's like we discussed before. I did not have a dream to become a writer, but I decided to write my first book, which is unorthodox in English, for a very simple, practical reason. When I went to see my lawyer and she said that your chances are almost zero that you keep your son, I said, well, what is my option? How can I use this chance? How can I make it as big as possible? And she said, well, the law will not help you. But my experience tells me that your community doesn't like to be in the public eye. And she says, you have to find a way to be in the public eye. And at the time, there was already quite famous case of a young woman named Gitte Greenwald. Gitte Greenwald came from the same community as my husband, and in 2008, she ran away with her small daughter. And one day, she was with her daughter on the playground, and a white van came, and a man jumped out and stole her daughter. And the daughter was hidden. She couldn't find her, and she went to court, and the problem with these cases in the American courts is they take 10 years because you can postpone, and meanwhile the child is growing up far away from its mother, and then at the end of 10 years the judge says, well, the child has been so long with the father, it's better for the child to stay. And it happens very often. So Gitte Greenwald, she was not stupid. She right away went to the newspapers. Gitte Greenwald was a very beautiful young woman. And she knew that if she is in the newspapers, people will pay attention. She was so young, and she took beautiful photos of herself, and it was in all the New York magazines and papers, this poor woman whose child was kidnapped. And it was a big scandal. And I thought, when I read the newspapers, I was still in the community with my son, I thought she will win. But she didn't win. Because a newspaper article, it's 1 week and it's forgotten. And there is a new scandal next week. And that was Gitte Greenwald's biggest challenge. She had public attention, but for a short time, and the community knew this. So I thought, oh, if my lawyer says to me I need public attention, then I need to have much more than Gitte Greenwald for much longer. And I thought, well, I don't know how to do this. So I think the only thing I can do is to write a book. And that was the decision, to write the book. And in the end, as you will read in this book, the reason that I got custody of my son is because right before I was supposed to go on an American TV show that 12 million people watch, my lawyer called the lawyer from my community and said, if you don't give her the custody, she will tell the whole country what's going on. And I got the signature on the paper 10 minutes before the interview. So I write for practical reasons, and I go on this TV show the day of publication, and it's huge feedback. And the book, it's sold out in 1 hour. And for some reason it became an enormous, unexpected success in the United States. And my publisher was shocked. And they said, they were really shocked. They were not prepared. They did not print enough books. We only sold ebooks because we didn't have enough books. And they said to me, oh, you must immediately write another one because you are so successful now. And I said, but what will I write about? And they said, oh, what it's like after you leave. And I said, but I'm only out for 3 years, not even. Nothing happened to me except suffering. They said, but go on a journey, discover the American dream, sex, drugs, rock and roll. And I thought, no, it's not very likely. I have a small child, and I'm too conservatively raised for this. But they were pushing so hard. They said, you want to be a writer, you want to keep writing books. This is, you got to do it. You have to write another book. And I thought, okay, well, I don't have a choice because that's the only thing I know how to do, and this is what they want, and they are prepared to pay me for it. So I tried, and it's. I think the result was like a mixed bag. I think there was some good parts, but some parts that I didn't really want to write, and I was under pressure to write. And after the book came out in the US, I moved away, and I thought I will not write again, because I thought I will not give people what they want. And I met a small publisher in Berlin who wanted very much to publish my first book in German, and he was surprised that it was not published before. And then he discovered that the German publishers had rejected it in 2012 because they felt it's too sensitive in Germany. With the history of the Holocaust, we cannot publish a book about a Jewish girl who runs away, it's too sensitive. But he said he was Swiss, so I'm allowed. So he published it from a very small publisher. I mean, one man in a small one-room apartment, right? A tiny publisher, but it became also a very big success in Germany. And then he said the same thing to me that my American publisher says, is now we have to publish another book. And I said, no, I don't want to, because I have one, but I don't like it. He says, well, just write it how you want to. So I looked back at my old manuscript and the parts that my American publisher didn't want to include, and I took out the parts that they insisted on, and I updated it for my life until my new situation in Berlin. And it was published in German. And then when the Netflix series came out, a lot of the foreign publishers who published the first book said, oh, the first book was so successful, we also want the second book. And I said to my American publisher, I have another version, and it's not your version, it's in German. And they said, okay, well, we'll take the new one, because everybody wants it now.
Yes.
So they agreed to reissue it in English, and it's this version. It's I have to say it's a bit shorter. In German, it's 700 pages, but that's because my editor was the translator. This publisher in the small publishing house, he was doing the translation himself, and he was so in love with his own translation that he couldn't edit it anymore. And this was a really big problem that I did not expect. He loved every sentence that he translated, and he said, I cannot cut this sentence because I love it. I did such a good job with it. So it became 700 pages long, but later with the American publisher, I shortened it to this version. It's a long story.
Gerai, tai trumpai labai šitą ilgą istoriją. Kaip aš jau jums ir sakiau, knygos atsirado dėl to, pirmoji knyga atsirado dėl to, kad reikėjo kovoti labai sudėtingą ilgą tęsinę kovą ir Niujorke jau buvo iš bendruomenės pasitraukus viena mergina, irgi su mažu vaikeliu ir chasidų bendruomenė labai nemėgsta būti viešumoje ir ta mergina savo kovą kovojo tiesiog duodama interviu laikraščiams, bet laikraštis toks daiktas, šiandien naujiena, rytoj jau ne. Ir dar atsitiko baisesnis dalykas, kad tiesiog jinai ėjo su vaikeliu mieste, sustojo autobusiukas, pagrobė tą vaikelį ir jinai daugiau jo niekada nematė. Tai ta kova tapo dar sudėtingesnė ir laikraštis turbūt buvo ne ta Deborah įkvėpus priemonė, kaip jai reiktų kovoti. Jin galvojo, aš turiu dabar būti eteryje nuolat ir pavaryti geriau negu ta mergina, kuriai taip pat nepasisekė. Taip gimė knygos idėja. Ir tada aš jos klausiau, kodėl Egzodas yra perrašytas, jeigu čia tas žodis tinka, nes tai buvo knyga, prie kurios jį dar pridėjo kokį 50% naujos medžiagos. Ir taip atsirado tas ant viršelio užrašas Papildytas leidimas. Tai čia labai ta ilga istorija, žodžiu, prasideda, žinokit, kas nesupratot jūsų problemos, bet šita knyga yra lygiai tokia pati populiari ir lygiai taip pat visos skirtingiausios pasaulio šalis nori ją leisti savo kalbą. So you...
Oh my God, you are so fast, it's not possible.
No, I'm not fast. Here I'm not fast.
Okay.
I will show you later what's happening when I'm fast. Yes. So let's talk about Berlin a bit. It's a almost 10 years. Yes.
10 years.
What have you discovered there? I mean, most.
I mean, in the beginning, I thought, Berlin was very exciting. I arrived, in a sense, at the end of Berlin's heyday, we would say, because Berlin was an exciting city after the wall fell. It was a kind of blank slate. People came from all over the world, and many of the houses were occupied, and it was a city of freedom and of art and culture. And when I came, it was right at the end of this, and then we had the summer of 2015. And since then, it's really been a city in crisis and a country in crisis. But to this day, especially now with the political situation in Germany as it is, Berlin is quite a city of rebellion. It's very much an exception to the rest of the country. It has its own rules, and it's a strong intellectual community of people from everywhere. And so you have a chance in Berlin to experience views that you would elsewhere not experience, and to really think and critically and independently. So I'm happy I'm there, But at the same time, I also feel that it's disappearing.
Berlynas, anot Deboros, yra absoliutus pankų miestas, visiškai kitoks negu visa likusi Vokietija. Ten daug kuriančių skirtingų žmonių, kurie gali kritiškai žiūrėti savo šalį ir į pasaulį, turbūt ir į save lygiai taip pat. Ir dabar ta situacija truputėlį keičiasi. Keičiasi, taškas. Bliamba, gal reikia keisti profesiją, vertėja. Aš mačiau, jos užsirašinėja, ten brauko kažkokias trumpas frazes užsirašo. Yes, I will become translator, I think so. But I lost the mind, you know? I forgot the last sentence.
The last sentence was something about how all the things I love about Berlin, I also see it's disappearing. That it's threatened.
Jo, tai visi dalykai, kuriuos 2014-2015 Deborah pamilo apie Berlyną, jie kažkur tai baigia prapult. And what is the reason, in your opinion?
Okay, so it's complicated. In Germany, the arts and culture is funded by the state, and a lot of the media is funded by the state. And the state is being impacted by the pressure of the increasing approval for the far-right parties. And many other political parties in Germany think that the answer to the far-right is to try to become more like the far-right in order to take away their voters. This never works. It doesn't work. But for some reason, it seems to be the only solution that they can offer, because they are, for one reason or another, not interested in actually doing good political work. And so the far right is especially now using the current iteration of the Middle East conflict to try to enact censorship and to marginalize the voices of migrants and of immigrants. And they use the Staatsräson. So Merkel made a big speech that the existence of Israel is the Staatsräson for Germany, so the raison d'etat, the reason that Germany exists. And when she said this, it caused like a shift in the discourse, and since then the right uses its position on Israel and the Holocaust to claim that the 5 million Muslims living in Germany are a threat to Jewish people and to Germany. And because they are so loud about this, and because they are so popular, the other political parties feel that they have to copy this to prove to the voters of the far right that they are also taking care of this issue of the dangerous Muslims. And because the arts and culture in Germany is so tolerant and diverse, there are a lot of Muslim voices, and there are a lot of anti-racist voices. And because their funding is from the government, and the government is trying to, in a sense, censor any voice that can be perceived as critical to Israel, they are trying to exclude certain artists and cultural organizations from getting money or from being able to invite certain people. And this has gotten so extreme to the point that 30% of the artists in Germany that are cancelled for their political views are Jewish. This is a very strange situation, and it has to do with the rise of right-wing radicalism in Israel, which has an interest in investing in far-right parties in Europe. So we see, for example, the link between Netanyahu and Orban, and we saw the link between the right-wing parties in Poland. And the same thing is happening now with the right-wing party in Germany. There is a kind of alliance with Israel against Muslims. And for me personally, when I moved to Berlin, I lived in an Arab neighborhood, and many of my first friendships with Palestinians and with Arab people were in Berlin. And look, I'm American, so to an extent it's normal for me to believe in peace, but in Europe that's quite a radical position, because the Jewish communities in Europe historically felt more threatened and still remember feeling threatened, so they are generally more nervous around this issue. it's often difficult for me to identify with this because my life is full of interactions between Palestinians and Israelis. It's full of interactions between Jews and Muslims. And so I really struggle to understand where these narratives come from. And I think that this is hurting Berlin. This is hurting the freedom of ideas and of art.
Do you feel safe there? I mean, I understand that the world is becoming more and more radical. And it's very, intense and scary, etc. But, yeah.
If I feel safe, does any of us feel safe today? Whenever I speak to people, I hear that everyone is worried about the future and is asking themselves if their idea of safety is an illusion. So maybe the question is rather, am I starting to realize that the safety was never there? Am I starting to realize that we have to fight? We have to learn from history. We have to be willing to resist, and I think this is hard for us because my generation, it's maybe the first generation that does not have a memory of resistance. I don't know how relevant this is in Lithuania, because I think Lithuania, it's the same. Okay, so my generation would be the first. So we are learning for the first time how, and maybe in Lithuania you have the fortune that you can learn from your parents and your grandparents. But in Germany, the people who resisted are gone. There are museums to them, but they are small, and every day I think on social media I see a picture of Sophie Scholl, but that's it. So I think the scariest part is that we don't know how to resist. We don't have this experience.
Vertimas būtų mums visiems šakės. Jo. Okay.
You can sum it up in a sentence. It's all going to shit.
We're all gonna die.
Yes.
We're all gonna die. Yeah.
That's what you said.
Yeah.
Don't bother translating, you get the idea.
Okay, maybe there's some bright side. Let's go to the bright side, not the dark one. Yeah. I'm interested about dream country, America.
Okay.
It wasn't your dream country. You realized, I mean. You traveled, you moved from New York to countryside, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I said at the very beginning of the conversation, I think my problem was I didn't grow up in America. I grew up in a reproduction of a European shtetl, speaking a language from Europe, with traditions and clothing from Europe. And when I left and I wanted to be American, I realized I don't know anything about America, and America knows nothing about me. I don't understand how they dress. I don't understand the difference between bootcut jeans and skinny jeans. And why does it matter what is on the pocket of the jeans? I don't understand this till today. But it was very strict. When I went to university, what you had on the pocket of your jeans decided who your friends were. And I thought, this is so ridiculous. I will never understand this culture. And I thought, I will always feel like an alien. And then when I started to visit Europe, I thought, but this is familiar, this I understand. Here is a language I understand, here is a cultural heritage I'm a part of. And the truth is that just like here you have a Jewish museum, and it's full of people who are interested in this topic, and the people who work in this museum went to university and studied Jewish history, of Jewish migration and Jewish culture. There is a desire in Europe to know the history. Americans don't like to think about the past. They don't want to think about how they persecuted the Native Americans. They don't want to think about how many people they killed in the Vietnam War or what mess they made in Afghanistan. They like to live only in the present. And if you come into American society and you want to be a part, they say, okay, but you must leave your past behind. You must adapt and meld into America. And I just couldn't. It just was impossible. It was too strange, too foreign. And I really feel that I am a European, and that in a way my grandparents, what they tried to do in Williamsburg was to never leave Europe. They tried to recreate Europe. And now I am here, and for the first time since I left, I am renewing my American passport. Because I think maybe I have to. Maybe things will change. And when I say to people that I am afraid of the far right, they say, don't worry, Putin will be here before the far right. So I think this we all have in common.
Yes, you have very good sense of humor. Knygoje, apie kurią mes čia šiandien šnekamės, Deborah daug šneka apie tai, kad jinai nepritapo prie amerikietiškos svajonės koncepto. Ir kai aš jos paklausiau apie tai dabar, jinai sako, kad jinai užaugo bendruomenį, kuri buvo pastatyta štetlo Europoje principu. Jie elgėsi kaip europiečiai, gyveno kaip europiečiai, kalbėjo kaip europiečiai. Ir amerikietiška kultūra, kur nelabai madinga ir nelabai kas nori apmąstyti praeitį, galvoti apie istoriją. Jeigu tu jau čia esi, tai tu turi susilieti su šitą amerikietišką svajonę, joje ištirpti ir būti taip, kaip tau yra nurodyta ir būti tuose rėmuose, kurie tau yra nurodyti. Jinai tiesiog negalėjo prie to pritapti, su tuo susitaikyti, dėl to jinai perskaitysit, kur jinai nuvažiavo ir ką jinai veikia ir kaip jinai paskui Berlyne atsirado, bet keista, ne, kad Amerika kažkam gali būti nesvajonė, o bausmė ir kad nuo jos pabėgti labai norisi. When was the last time you was in Williamsburg, in your home?
2014.
2014.
Before I moved to Berlin. Yeah.
How it was?
I was a little nervous about being recognized. I was in a car and I wanted to show my son where I grew up before we left. And I asked him if he would have liked to grow up there, and he says no. And I said, so it's good that I left. And he's like, yes. And then we moved to Berlin. And today he's like every other spoiled prince of his mother. I will say this, yes.
But as I understood, he's living with his father.
Yes.
His
father left. I mean, I will just speak about the series very quickly, about the Netflix series, because the part that takes place in Berlin, it's actually fictional. So all of the scenes in the series that are in the past, like her memories, they're from the book. And what happens from the point that she decides to leave, it's a fantasy, because I wanted it to be different from my real life now. But the one thing that's really nice about the Berlin part of the series is that Esti arrives in Berlin and immediately she has friends. And a lot of people said, it's so unrealistic and it's so hard to make friends and no way she will have friends in one day, but it's actually not true. The same thing happened to me when I came to Berlin, because when I arrived in Berlin, it was full of people that were coming from everywhere, that were running away from something. Already then, the first people I met in Berlin were dissidents from Russia and refugees from the Yugoslav war and just people running away from strict Catholic villages in Bavaria. So really, it was full of runaways, and we were all the same. And in one day, I went to a coffee shop and I had 7 friends. So it's real. And the other thing that's really very based on the real story in the Berlin part is that at the very end of the series, Esti's husband finds her and they are in a room together and he says to her, I love you, please come back. And she says, I can't come back. And he cuts off his curls. And this is a very momentous occasion, because when you cut off your curls, what does it mean? It means that you can't go back. And he tries to say to her, for you, I am willing to not go back. Let's stay together and we won't go back. And she still says no, because she found her own path and she knows that he needs to find his. But when the series ends, you know that Yankee will never go back. He doesn't know where he will go now. He's not as clear as Esti what he wants, but he has spent enough time outside to understand something is wrong with the way he lived until now. He saw some kind of truth, and now he cannot unsee it. And this is based on the true story that my ex-husband left the community 4 years after I left. He had like a slow process of realization, And in 2014, he wrote me a letter where he said, "Thank you. Because you left, I realized that I could leave, and because I left, now I am happy, and before I did not even know what happy was." He remarried, he has 2 more children, he has a career that he loves, and he found his own path, and as a result, my son can have a relationship with his father, and in a sense, there is, at the very least, not the knowledge that sometimes we have when we walk away from things, that we break them. Because when I walked away from my marriage, I didn't want to punish my ex-husband. I just wanted my freedom. And I said to him, "You can come with me." And he said, I cannot leave my family and my community. And I knew that by leaving him, I would break his life, because to be divorced in the community, it's a disaster. So for me to know that at the end he found a much bigger happiness than he could have imagined, I feel this is a gift for all of us. That this healed us in a sense, and it allows us to respect each other and to appreciate each other. And in a way, that is what makes us a family and not an arranged marriage.
Deborah sako, kad jos sūnus Izaokas bendrauja su tėčiu ir didžiąją dalim taip yra todėl, kad praėjus 4 metams po to, kai jinai pabėgo iš bendruomenės, jisai padarė lygiai tą patį ir parašė jai laišką padėkodamas už tai, kad kai jį išėjo, jis suprato, kad ir jisai gali išeiti, ir dabar jisai dirba mylimą darbą, turi dar 2 vaikus, yra laimingai vedęs dar kartą, ir jų bendravimą ir jų buvimą šeima tikrąja to žodžio prasme palaiko ne kažkokie oficialūs dokumentai ar kažkoks apibrėžtumas oficialus, bet tai, kad jie gali dabar gerbti vienas kitą ir būti toje taikoje, praėję būtų šitas savo skirtingas, bet to pačiu tokias panašias keliones. Ir dar prieš tai Deborah papasakojo, kas seriale yra tikrai ir pagal knygą, o kas ne. Tai man atrodo, kad galėsit patys pabandyti patirti tai, paskaitę, paskui pažiūrėję serialą. Aš šiaip žinokit, nesupras lietuviškai. Man serialas tai nelabai. Ir jums nelabai. Ir jums nelabai. O? Patiko.
What is happening?
Knyga daug įdomesnė.
We are saying that the book is much more better than series. Yes, and
all the people who like to read say this, and all the people who like to watch TV say the movie is better.
Yeah, but I mean, I am a lover of cinema, and I didn't like this series.
So sad. But I thought the series was very popular.
Very. Still.
But you don't like it.
But I like dark Scandinavian movies, so don't worry.
I also do.
Yeah.
Look, I did not love the part that takes place in Berlin, the fake part, but at the same time I think that Anna, the one who did the series, she's somebody who is also a mother at the same school as my son in Berlin. I think what she was trying to do is she was trying to make it appeal to the widest possible audience. And the truth is that the series was especially a huge success in very conservative cultures like India, South America, Turkey, Iran, Japan. So in places where women live in very strict conditions. Sorry. Yes. And as a result of the success of the series in these countries, there was all of a sudden this push for translation. And I found out, for example, that during the protest movement in Iran, people translated my book illegally and passed it around. I think the reason was to show that what they are fighting for, it's not an Iranian fight, it's a universal fight. It's a long heritage of women fighting, and we are all fighting for the same thing everywhere. And some of us are a little further behind, and some of us are a little further ahead, but it's the same thing. And we should not think that we are different from each other. We should not think those poor women in Iran, they somehow don't have what we have. They cannot fight for what we fought for. But it's not true. They are maybe on a different point in the spectrum, but we are one community. And I think that this book was a way of helping women understand that they might come from different religion, different culture, different language, but it's a universal story. It's not a Jewish story, it's not an American story, it's a woman's story. And then also it's a story beyond the gender issue of fighting for the freedom to be an individual, to be yourself, in a system that demands conformity and the sacrifice of your own desires. And guess what? It was very popular in Russia. And both my books are translated in Russia because they were able to get the license before the war. And after the war, the relations were cut, and they went ahead and translated. And I still get messages on social media from Russian readers because they see something. They see a reflection of their political situation.
Tai gerai, mums serialas gali nepatikti. Deborah sakė, kad jai tos netikros Berlyno dalis irgi nepatinka, jeigu ką. Bet įdomioji ir fainoji dalis turbūt jos paskutinio pasisakymo yra ta, kad šitas serialas labai populiarus šalyse, kur moteris neturi tokių tvirtų teisių ir jų situacija yra šiek tiek kitokia negu pas mus. Irane knyga buvo versta ir platinta nelegaliai ir apie Rusiją dalį turbūt irgi supratot, kad santykiai su karo pradžia buvo nukirsti, bet Deborah vis dar gauna žinučių iš Rusijos, iš moterų Rusijoje ir matyt, kad mes turėtumėm neskirtumų, čia Rusija taškas, bet grįžtant atgal prie minties, mes neskirtumų turbūt pasaulyje tarpusavy turim ieškoti, o panašumų. Ir matyti dėl to ta knyga sukelia tokią, ir knygos sukelia tokį rezonansą, dėl to, kad netgi Rusijos iš mažosios R moteris randa, kaip susitapatinti su Deborah's istorija. Ką čia, kaip aš čia išverčiau, nesupratau, kūjau man visai.
What is happening?
I'm nervous about my translation. I'm trying to
Does she really translate everything I say? Everything? No. It's not possible.
Okay, o kiek dabar yra valandų, gal kas nors žinot? Po 7:06. Okay. I have another conversation tonight, you know.
With whom?
With you don't know them.
But I mean, this is not fair. I mean, you have to just commit to one or the other. You can't just like be a butterfly and go from flower to flower.
I'm like American dream, you know, consume. Okay, yes, but don't worry about it. I'm just asked for a clock because I don't have it here.
Okay, it's fine. If you have to go, I will do it without you.
No, I will stay. They will understand. I mean, anyway, there are traffic, so
you always have an excuse.
Yeah, so jūs to jau prisijungsit gerai, nes jau girdit, aš jau visai jau kaip krokodilas šneku. But you dedicated this book for your grandmother. Why?
Because my therapist says she's the only reason I'm not crazy. My therapist says that the reason why we are mentally healthy individuals is because we have positive attachments when we are young, for example, to our parents. And if our parents are not there, then maybe to a grandmother or to an aunt or a sister. We need one positive attachment to be resilient, to be strong. And she says, if I did not have my grandmother and I would just have these negative relationships, then I would have problems. And she explained to me, because your grandmother loved you, you're okay. Because you know what it's like as a small child, even when things are difficult, that there is one person who is there for you. And I only realized how important this was much later when I did not have her anymore. And the dedication in the book is written in the same words as the dedication in my great-grandfather's thesis, because he dedicated his thesis in 1934 in the Ludwig Maximilian University of Munich to his mother, dem Andenken meiner unvergesslichen Mutter gewidmet, it's German, to my unforgettable mother. And I thought, who is this unforgettable mother? Why is she unforgettable? And then I discovered in this book that my great-great-grandmother was a very, very bad girl. She was from the shtetl, and she ran away with her older Catholic married lover to the city of Munich to live in sin with him for the rest of her life and to raise my great-grandfather as an illegitimate child. And I thought when I discovered this, wow, so it runs in the family. And it felt somehow right to dedicate to my grandmother what he did to his mother, these unforgettable women in our lives that make us strong and give us a clear sense of what we want to accomplish in life and to keep us whole and sane and healthy. Yeah.
Oi, kaip gražiai, tai dabar prisijunkit, kas nors, jau ką nors. Prašau, rankų miškas, tuoj pat. O?
Paklauskit, prašau, ar su ta bendruomenė, iš kurios jinai išėjo, turi po 15 metų nors kokį ryšį, su kuo nors?
Do you have any connection with your community?
I have no connection to my community, but I have a very strong connection to a community of people who left my community. We are connected all over the world because we are very many now, and especially for the series, many actors, many extras are people who left. And we had on the day that we filmed the wedding, we had a big reunion, and everybody was hugging and crying and screaming, and it was very emotional. And in the city of Berlin in the summer, it was very hot. Many extras were standing with the fur hats and the long black coats, and the people driving by were like, what the is happening here? It was very funny and very sweet. And since then, a lot of them have stayed in touch and have formed a community and tried to continue working on such projects together. So from them, because some of them have connections to their siblings, I sometimes hear news from the community, like that things change, for example. So I know that...
in a better way?
Sometimes not. Sometimes I hear that they become more radical in some aspects. But for example, they change their policy. They used to have this policy that if you leave, they say that you are dead. And they change this. Now they don't do this anymore. They stay in contact with people who leave later. Because they realize that many people leave. They lose too many people. So they try to keep the connection.
Tai Deborah su bendruomenė savo neturi jokių ryšių, bet jinai labai glaudžiai bendrauja su žmonėmis, kurie paliko tą bendruomenę. Ir seriale Vestuvių scena, visi žmonės, kurie yra nepagrindiniai aktoriai, jie yra tikri žmonės iš tos bendruomenės, pabėgę žmonės. Tai jie susitikę visi, klykė, rėkė, džiaugiasi, glebeščiavosi ir taip toliau. Ir buvo labai karšta Berlyne filmavimo metu. Jie buvo su tom kailiniam kepurėm ir tais juodais ploščiais iki žemės ir žmonės važiavo gatvėmis automobiliais ir galvojo, kas čia vyksta, kas čia šitie keistuoliai. Žodžiu, grįžtant dar prie bendruomenės, Deborah kartais išgirsta naujienų iš tos pusės ir kartais, kad jie keičiasi į gerą pusę, kartais, kad dar labiau radikalėja, bet jie bent jau pakeitė tą momentą sakymo, kad jeigu tu išeisi iš Hasidų, tu esi žuvęs, jie taip nebesako ir labiau laiko tuos ryšius netgi su išėjusiais, palaiko ryšius, nes tiesiog per daug žmonių palieka Hasidus ir jie turbūt, paprastai tariant, tokia strategiškas toks žingsnis, neberėkti, kad jūs niekas. Taip, Mariau, tu norėjai kažką.
Did Netflix consulted you prior to the TV series about making it, and maybe they proposed even acting in it? Haven't they?
Netflix doesn't consult with anyone. Netflix is some company far away that has a long line of people dealing with other people, and the people that the producers of this show talk to were small position, very low in the ladder. And when they pitched this idea of an adaptation, they said, listen, you are new in Europe, you want European projects, this is very cheap, it's prestigious, you want to invest anyway in European projects. We want to film a series in Yiddish. And they said, what is this language? Who speaks it? And they said, not very many people, a few 100,000, and they don't watch TV. But we want to do it anyway. And they said, okay, but we will give you very little money. So they gave us 5 million, which is a very small amount for 4 hours. And it was shot on an incredible low budget with 2 German production companies, mostly in Germany. And afterwards, when it was a huge success, the CEO of Netflix was like, yeah, that was my idea. You know, Netflix is a genius. We know when things are gold. But he had no idea that we existed before the series aired and became one of the most successful in the history of Netflix. Now I am suing them because there is a law in Europe that says if there is a very special success with intellectual property, that you're entitled to share. And Netflix has all these agreements with all these cultural unions about this, but they don't want to release their information because they know if they release their information, we will know what is happening, and we will be able, all the actors and the producers and the directors will be able to ask for more because they pay basically nothing. And now I take them to court to say, okay, but you have to open the books and tell us, how successful was it? Was it really 150 million people who watched it, or 200 million people watched it? How many people finished it? I want to know. So this will be very exciting. This is one of my next projects. Maybe I'll write a book about it.
By the way, in the first row we have most famous director in Lithuania, Giedrė Žickytė, so you don't even imagine what can she do with 5 million, okay?
Okay, we'll talk. Sounds good.
Yeah, dar kas nors? Taip.
I don't know whether my question would be ethical, but you haven't talked today about the life in the shuttle in your community. I probably should have read this book before
Yes.
coming here and watch movie, but can you still describe a bit of life in this shuttle? You mentioned clothing, you mentioned the European shuttle tradition, but what still you can say a few more words describing this?
I'm going to give you the whole speech from the beginning. We know that the Hasidic community started in the 1700s in White Russia. And we know it spread throughout the Ukraine, throughout Eastern Europe. It was a very exciting and revolutionary movement at the time. It was against the movement from Lithuania. It was in a big, ugly fight with the Lithuanian Jews because the Lithuanian Jews were Orthodox and they believed in the all-important relevance of the text. Everything was about the text. You had to go to school to study Hebrew and to learn the text. And the Hasidic movement says, well, some Jewish people are too poor or work too hard to study the text. It does not mean that they are not Jewish. It does not mean they're not religious. And they invented a new way of being religious. It was about singing and dancing, and you can pray to God while you milk the cows in the morning. You can pray to God while you sow the wheat. It was, in a way, almost like a proletariat revolution within the religion. And it was exciting. And it was open and mystical. And then when the Enlightenment started in Europe and the movement for political emancipation of Jewish people and the Zionist movement and so on, they started to feel threatened because there were all these other options. Before, they were the only other option in relation to this traditional orthodoxy. And then they realized they are losing people to even more freedom. Freedom of political emancipation, of secular education, of secular ideas about Jewishness. So they started to become stricter, more traditional in a way. They went back to the text, for example. They started to emphasize study of the text. And soon, they looked a lot like the Jews in Lithuania, but they had a little bit more dancing. By the time the rabbi of the town of Satu Mare was in his position in the early 1900s, he was already giving talks about the dangers of emancipation, the dangers of Zionism, of Jews who think they can become just like the others. They don't have to live separate anymore. They don't have to study the text. They don't have to follow the rules. And he said, God will punish us for this. He will send us a terrible, near-apocalyptic punishment. And when the Holocaust happened, he said, see, I was right. I said it will happen. The Holocaust was a punishment because we assimilated, because we let go of our traditions. And he said, I know how to prevent another Holocaust from happening. We will start a new community and it will be stricter than all the communities that came before. We will take every law in the Jewish books and make it even more extreme. So for example, most of you probably know that before World War II, it was normal for women, once they got married, to cover their hair. If you were Christian or Jewish, it was normal. You wore a nice little scarf around your head when you went out the house. Jewish people do this too, because in the Jewish text, just like in the Christian text, it says a woman should be modest and she should cover her hair. But before, Jewish people also wore a scarf over their head. They did not shave their head. But after the war, the rabbi said, now we are more extreme than before. Now we have to go the extra mile for God. So he goes the extra mile for us. And he says, if we ask women to shave their heads, they will not even be able to be tempted to show their hair, because they will have no hair to show. And it will not slip out by mistake, because it will not be there. And this is one example of many rules that he invented after the war to say, the traditions before are not enough. We must reinvent them to an extreme extent. And so all of the laws, for example, around modesty of women became very extreme, so that all of a sudden the skirts had to become much longer, and we were not allowed to wear certain fabrics because they show the shape of the body. And for example, also the rules around marriage became very strict, and around reproduction. And as you can hear, all of these new rules, they were very focused on women, because the rabbi believed that it is the sins of women that lead to these bad things in the world. All bad things in the world are because of women. And so whenever, for example, I remember when I was a child, there was a terror attack on Jews in Argentina, and he held a speech and said, it's because of our women. They are not modest enough. And he had a stocking that he invented, that all the women in my community wore, and he put the stocking on his arm, and he said, it's too thin, I can see through, it must be thicker. And he made all the stockings twice as thick, because he was convinced the sight of a possible skin of a woman's leg is the reason why the world will end. And with time, it just became more and more extreme. And every time there was a sense of something being out of control, there was a new rule about the behavior of women. And it was not stable. It was not something that stayed the same. And I think that a lot of this has to do with the trauma, that a lot of the people who started this community were survivors, and they felt guilty for surviving. And they felt that if they deprive themselves and deny themselves with all these rules, that they are somehow atoning for their guilt. And the problem with that premise is that with each new generation, the guilt is less, and therefore the motivation. So you would think this community cannot survive, right? How can you continue to convince each new generation that they have to live this way? And the answer is that they change the ideology as time goes on. They change the reasons. So instead of talking about the Holocaust, they will talk about, for example, what happens in Israel, and say this is also a reason why we have to live this way. They're always choosing new reasons. And how do you keep people stuck in this kind of system? You make them afraid. If you can make them afraid, you can convince them to do anything. Yeah. Maybe somebody wants to translate this. It's tough. How many people don't speak English in the audience? Is it a lot?
Kas nešnekat angliškai, prisipažįstat?
Šiek tiek šnekam, bet visko nesuprantam.
Gerai, bet vis tiek biški kažką suprantat. No, they understand a
They
bit,
understand.
so...
Okay,
yeah,
it's okay.
It's okay. Kažkas dar... Aha.
First of all, thank you, Deborah, for being here with us. It's so special to listen to all of the stories personally from you after reading your book. I wanted to ask you, you mentioned yourself that you are not the only one who wrote a personal story about escaping the community, right? And there are people in Israel, in America, and so on. What do you think made your book and the series so special? Is it more of a story, or you as a person who really wanted to tell this personal story and escape?
I think most of it is the accident of being the first. It was the first memoir of a woman who left. There were other books, but they came after, and most of them were novels, or they were essays written by men. And the journey of a man is very different. It's more about losing faith. The most interesting book that has come out of my community in the last years is by a trans woman named Abby Stein, and she was a rabbi in the community, and now she is a woman outside. She's really, really fascinating. I will tell one funny story because I had to interview her for a magazine. And I said to her, because I knew that in the community she had a wife and a child, I said, what was it like for you when you left with your child? Because for most women, it's very hard. Most women lose their children. And I said, tell me about it. And she said, oh, well, you know, they needed me for the divorce because the man gives the divorce where I come from. And I said, right, so you can ask for anything you want. She was like, yeah. I mean, I could ask them for $1 million if I want. Otherwise, my wife will never be free. And I said, so what did you ask for? I thought she will tell me she got custody. But she said, I asked for the right to wear a skirt when I visit my son. And I thought, this is very interesting because here you can see that even though she knows from when she's young that her gender is female, she's socialized like a man. So she does not think that her life without her child is worthless. But I was raised as a woman to believe that if I don't have my child, my life is worth nothing. The women I know who left, who lost their children, committed suicide. But she was socialized as a man in this community, so she was taught to believe that it's not her job. It's not her responsibility to raise the kids. It's the responsibility of the mother. And I found that very interesting because I think we can feel our genders, but we cannot really feel our socialization freely. Socialization is something that is imposed upon us. And it really made me question in which ways we are led to believe we need to desire or fear based on how we are perceived as women or as men. Why do I think it's such a tragedy to lose my son? But my husband, for example, my ex-husband, sees him twice a year and he don't feel that it's a tragedy. And I don't think this is because he is a man biologically. I think it's because this is how men are socialized where he comes from. And so we can see how much is in the socialization that is not really connected to our gender. And I found that fascinating. That's a really good book. I mean, the book is really good. I think it's called Becoming Eve. Maybe it's translated? Maybe not? No. Okay. Okay. But it's interesting.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
What kind of books are you reading yourself? What are your favorite? Is it historical novels or what?
Well, I was talking today to my guide Erica that I love Czesław Miłosz, and I know that he's got a Lithuanian connection. I really loved his novel about the Isa Valley, and I love the memoir he wrote. It's called in Polish Rodzina Europa, the House of Europe. In English, it's called Native Realm. I love books from his generation. I read a lot of the generation of people who lived through the war and the time after the war. I read also now a lot in German. For example, I have to prepare for a Swiss TV show about literature, and I am reading a book from a young Turkish woman named Melih Kiak, who I think probably not translated, but an example of how in the German culture scene there was always a strong representation of migrant and immigrant voices, and that now this will change, or they're trying to change it, but it's one of the reasons I value the Berlin and the German literary scene, because I have access to these stories. I'm reading a book about Birobidzhan, which is the autonomous Jewish Republic. It's a fantasy book about what if Birobidzhan was a huge success, written by a left-wing Israeli who had to leave the country because he's too radical in his views. And of course, in Germany, they don't say what the allegory is because it's politically too dangerous. So they just say, oh, what a lovely, fantastic, magic, realist fairy tale. But they don't say that it really is about alternative to the Zionist project, because then he would be cancelled. So I'm reading this. I'm reading a lot. I read so much, nonstop. But it's true that now that the situation politically in the last years have become so tense, I am reading books that mean something to me politically. And to go back to the very beginning of our conversation when we talked about history, there was one book called The Memory Monster from the author Yishai Sarid, which is about this problem that sometimes we get here.
I hope that you will join and enjoy Vilnius, because tomorrow you have a book fair interview, yeah?
Yes.
So in your free time, please enjoy our museums, our bread ice cream, it's a lot of cepelinai. We also have kugelis.
I know, I grew up
Then
with this.
vedarai.
I don't know what this is, but I know what this borsha, this salty borsha is. I grew up with a lot of food that's similar. Just so you know, we got a lot of from your culture. And today I was in the Baigalista, and I had bagels, and it was even better than in New York. And the salmon was chef's kiss.
Yes. Girdėjot? Mes geriau varom negu New York'e. Ačiū labai visiems, kurie atėjo, atradot laiko. Rytoj tikrai, jeigu nepapulsit į tą kamštį nuo Panevėžio, nuvažiuokit su Deborah dar truputėlį pabūti. Labai gerai buvo, ne? Liuks. Thank you.
Thank you. That was really great. Well done. Bravo.